Alrighty, I think we're good to go. Okay. So good afternoon, everybody. My name's Katie Malgioglio. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator and Community Liaison for UConn TAB, UConn Technical Assistance for Brownfields. So welcome to our third webinar in our Community Engagement series. We started out with our SEEDS framework, then moved into the stakeholder analysis, and today we're going to be talking about our SWOT analysis tool and how it can be used in brownfields redevelopment and community engagement. So my background is in social work. I got my bachelor's degree and my master's degree in social work, both from the University of Connecticut. And I'm joined today by a wonderful MSW student. Jocelyn, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Katie. My name is Jocelyn Therial. I'm an MSW student currently at the University of Connecticut School of Social Work. I'm doing an independent study this semester where I'm working with Katie and the community engagement team at TAB with some of their webinars and other community engagement projects. So I'm really glad to be here as a guest speaker today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So let's get started. So here is our agenda for today. We're going to just start with a brief overview of the SWOT analysis, going over some of the basics. What is a SWOT analysis? Who uses a SWOT analysis? When should we use a SWOT analysis? And I'll also go into some more specific examples of situations in which a SWOT analysis would be useful in brownfields redevelopment. And then Jocelyn will go into a bit more detail on what exactly the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats mean in the context of brownfields redevelopment, and what these might look like in our communities. So then we will just shortly go over why a SWOT analysis is such an important tool in brownfields redevelopment, and Jocelyn will finish us off with a hypothetical case study based on her hometown, Cheshire, Connecticut. And this is just going to give everyone a chance to see the process of completing a SWOT analysis and what one looks like when it's all done. We'll also have time at the end for questions, and we should have no issues getting you out of here before the 30-minute mark. So first and foremost, SWOT analysis stands for strengths, opportunities, weaknesses, and threats. Jocelyn will dive deeper into what this means in terms of brownfields redevelopment, but in general, any community or organization can use this tool to analyze their own strengths and assets, areas that can use improvement, external opportunities to be utilized, and any external threats that could impact a local brownfields project. So a SWOT analysis can be used in so many different contexts. It's especially common in business and marketing, but it can also be super helpful in conversations on brownfields and community engagement. So SWOT analyses can be used to examine benefits and challenges within redevelopment projects and create strategic plans based upon those findings. And you'll see here at the bottom is sort of how we lay out the SWOT and how we can visualize all of these things together. Who can use a SWOT analysis? Well, anyone can use a SWOT analysis. And when we're talking more specifically about brownfields redevelopment, any stakeholders or anyone involved in this process who wants a deeper insight can benefit from using a SWOT analysis. More specifically, though, our SWOT analysis tool targets municipal governments, regional planning commissions, nonprofits, or any other public entity that's applying for brownfields grants or leading any sort of redevelopment efforts. People in these powerful positions can really benefit from this sort of intentional awareness and understanding of their communities. So just putting time towards completing a SWOT analysis can really make a big difference. And then a SWOT analysis can also be completed collaboratively as part of a public meeting or in a focus group. And this is a great way to not only inform the community, but also meaningfully engage with them, incorporate their input and their voices, and listen to their experiences as well. So when should a SWOT analysis be utilized? A SWOT analysis can be useful at any point. We actually got a question at another presentation we were giving last week. Someone asked if TAB's engagement and outreach services were only for communities applying for the cleanup grant or in the cleanup and redevelopment part of the process. So we want to clarify that community engagement, including a SWOT analysis, is actually going to be more effective and more sustainable the earlier that it begins. There's no way that completing a SWOT analysis is going to bring about any negative impacts. Like the slide says, gaining a stronger understanding of your community and your specific project will only help you. And I do see your question, Kathleen. You can unmute if you want.
Sorry, I don't have a question. Sorry, I'm late.
Oh no, that's okay. That's all good.
Yep.
I do it all the time. So yes, gaining a stronger understanding of your community and your specific project will only help you and prevent obstacles down the road. And it will also allow you to build and cultivate authentic connections and partnerships with your community members. So all that to say, you can complete a SWOT analysis anytime, but the earlier, the better. And I do see some people trickling in. I just want to remind everybody that this is recorded, so if you miss the first bit, that's totally fine and you'll have access to it at a later point. So just to put all of this into perspective a bit, here are some brownfield specific situations where a SWOT analysis can be really helpful. So firstly, exploring different options for reuse and redevelopment, looking into strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats is a great way to narrow down on different ideas and possibilities when it comes to redevelopment of a local brownfield site. And then kind of in that same arena, SWOT can also be used to analyze your organization or your community as a whole in order to get a better sense of capacity, any possible stakeholders or partners, different scenarios or threats to look out for, and what strengths you can capitalize on as you take on a brownfields redevelopment project, which I'm sure we all know can be a pretty big endeavor. Then earlier on in the process, a SWOT is a great tool to be used collaboratively for community visioning, community need, or goal setting. And then a SWOT can also be used in a pinch if for some reason your plans need to be adjusted, changed, modified, or refined at all. So I'm going to pass to Jocelyn to talk a little bit more about strengths, weaknesses, threats, and opportunities.
Thank you, Katie. So yeah, we'll just go right down in order in that line, starting first with strengths. Strengths can really be defined as people and resources within your community or your organization that can internally uplift and support your redevelopment project. This can include things like having really strong community organizations, having shared ideals, having access to volunteers, or having used successful community engagement tactics from the past. A key detail I want to note for strengths and for weaknesses in a moment is that these are really going to be internal to whatever your frame of reference is or the point of view that you are looking at. So for example, if you're focusing a lot more broadly on your community as a whole, like your entire geographic community, your strengths, I just want to pause and ask everyone to mute their mics too, just because we're getting a little feedback. So if you're focusing more broadly, like on an entire geographic community, the strengths that you identify will likely be a lot more broad, like having a lot of environmental justice nonprofits located in your town. Whereas if your frame of focus is more narrow, you're likely going to have a lot more narrow strengths listed. So if you're focusing within a nonprofit or a community organization, a strengths may look like having a lot of financial resources on your team. So you really will vary in the scope of what your strengths may look like, depending on what you're focusing on. Questions that you could use to help identify strengths include what are important assets in your community in regards to brownfields redevelopment, what unique resources exist within your organization that you can utilize for your project, and also what engagement strategies that you've worked on and that you've used in the past and that were successful. Switching now to weaknesses, these can be defined as, again, internal limitations that could prevent a brownfields redevelopment project from occurring or from being successful. Examples of this oftentimes may look like the reverse of what your strengths are. So limited financial resources, lack of transparency and information sharing, lack of organizational capacity, or even issues with the redevelopment site itself. Again, these are really going to vary depending on how broad or how narrow your focus is for your frame of reference. So if you're looking at a nonprofit or a community organization, lacking certain community or organizational values or certain missions may stand out as a weakness, versus if you are looking at a geographic community, it could look a lot more at like wealth within your community and things like that. And then questions that can help you to identify weaknesses could include, does your redevelopment vision have areas for improvement? Are there any weaknesses within your organization that could create barriers to your redevelopment effort? Or are there certain groups in your community that have been excluded from past engagement initiatives? And now switching gears a little bit as we look at opportunities and threats, we're going to switch kind of what our point of view is here. Whereas before we were looking internal to what your community or your organization possesses, now we're going to look to what it has available to itself outside of the scope of that team. So for opportunities, this could be defined as positive external factors that communities or organizations can take advantage of to ensure the success of your redevelopment project. So this could look like funding sources, having really strong community interest in your project, and even being able to utilize media and social media to advertise your project. Questions here that could help you to identify opportunities could include, are there any opportunities for expanding your community engagement? How will your redevelopment project meet the needs of your community? Or how can you turn your community strengths that you had identified in one of the previous parts that we looked at, how can you turn those into opportunities? I did want to kind of make a connection here to UConn Tab's stakeholder analysis tool, which we did previously in another webinar and is available on UConn Tab's website to review. The stakeholder analysis kind of allows you to look at interest and power in all of the different stakeholders in your community that could have some sort of say in your redevelopment project. And for opportunities, you could refer back to that tool and look at the people who have a high amount of interest and a high amount of power, because they may represent really strong opportunities for your project. And then lastly, for threats, these can be defined as negative external factors that have the potential to adversely affect your brownfields redevelopment project. This could include pushback or opposition from community members, organizations, even elected and appointed officials within your town who have a significant amount of power and have a certain stance on the project. This could also include legislative changes and language barriers in your community. Questions that can be used to help identify threats could include, what threats could your community, or what threats could harm your community or your redevelopment vision? Are there any competing or opposing ideas for the project, like what to use the site for? And do your community weaknesses that you identified earlier present any threats to your project? And again, linking it back to the stakeholder analysis tool, you could consider the people and the entities who have less power and less interest in your project as being potential areas where there could be threats to the success of your project.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn. So I'm going to turn it right back to her. But before I do, I just wanted to kind of wrap up this more conceptual part of our webinar together with a short conversation on why a SWOT analysis is such a valuable tool in brownfields redevelopment. So firstly, using a SWOT analysis helps to identify and build upon strengths like we've been talking about. And we can do this in the context of a redevelopment project, a community engagement initiative, your own organization or municipality. It can be used for a lot of different things. And it's really whatever makes sense for you. And Tab is also happy to help kind of walk through this process with you. Coming from a social work background, Jocelyn and I see a lot of value and importance in a strengths-based approach and helping community find and work with the assets that they already have. Kind of on the opposite side of that coin, a SWOT also provides a better understanding of a project's weaknesses and any threats that may exist. So if you complete a SWOT early on in the redevelopment process, it will grant you with more time to meaningfully address concerns and any other obstacles, barriers, or challenges that may arise. Then, as we've mentioned a bit before, and just want to emphasize, a SWOT analysis can be a game changer when it comes to honing in on a shared community vision. SWOT can provide a lot of clarity and collaboration when it comes to decision making, and it's a great tried and true tool for strategic planning. Then finally, of course, we want to bring the focus back to community engagement. Conducting a SWOT analysis can really provide a much deeper understanding of your community. It can be used collaboratively to foster community building and building trust. And it's a great way to get the community involved and remind them that they are a part of this process. It also helps us stay strengths-based and solution-oriented while acknowledging weaknesses and preparing for any threats. So overall, there's so much that can be done with a SWOT analysis. And if this is of interest to you, um, definitely reach out. We'll have our contact information up at the end of the presentation. And we'll also have any time for questions or comments at the end. But to conclude, I'm going to turn it over to Jocelyn for our case study.
Thank you. Yeah, so as Katie mentioned, I'm going to be kind of going through a really brief hypothetical case study on Cheshire, Connecticut. It is my hometown, so I have a lot of connections and a lot of knowledge about kind of what has gone on within the community. And I'm basing this loosely off of a brownfields redevelopment project that has gone on and has started in Cheshire. So I'll just read off our little bio here. Cheshire, Connecticut is a medium-sized suburban town with a population of about 29,000 people. Approximately 85% identify as white, 8.5% as Asian, 6.1% as Black or African American, 5.2% as Hispanic or Latino, and 1.2% as American Indian or Alaska Native. The median household income in Cheshire is around $122,000 a year. In one of Cheshire's historic districts, there's a former button factory that has been deemed a brownfield site because of the presence of asbestos, lead paint, and some other hazardous materials. After a local nonprofit received EPA funds for the assessment and cleanup at this site, plans to remediate it and repurpose it into a local arts and community enrichment center have been considered. Many of the community members appear to be in favor of this plan so far, but comprehensive public opinion has not been gathered yet. All right, so one by one, I'm just going to walk through each of the 4 squares, starting in the same order that I walked through the steps before. I do want to point out, as I mentioned earlier when I was talking about the difference between strengths and weaknesses in terms of what your lens is. For my strengths and weaknesses, my area of focus is really going to be on this nonprofit that is really leading this project team for this redevelopment purpose. So the strengths and the weaknesses are all going to be things that I have identified as kind of living within that team, and the opportunities and threats are going to be factors that lay outside of it. And I'd be happy to go through this more if there are questions at the end. If anyone has questions about differentiating between the two of those, I'd be happy to get into that more. So starting with strengths, with this team, I've identified that a lot of them really have a strong sense of connection to the community and really have strong values about living in like having that small town identity of living in a small suburban town. In addition to this, the team does have a fair amount of financial resources available to them as people who mainly live middle to upper middle class. And there's a fairly large team that is working on this project. I believe that the nonprofit has about 20 to 30 people at least on their team. So all of this together, I think this helps to create a really strong will and capacity to be able to sustain the work on this project long term. Flipping that a little bit, looking at weaknesses, because a lot of the people who are on this project team work full-time jobs, many of them are working with other nonprofits in town and are working on other town projects. Many of them have limited time because this is sort of their thing that's on the side. So the lack of time that a lot of people bring could potentially pose a weakness for sustaining long-term work on the project. Something that I identified as well is that there's a lack of racial and ethnic diversity on this project team. So as I mentioned in the last slide, Cheshire is about 85% white, and then there are smaller proportions of racial and ethnic minorities living in town. For the most part, though, almost every person on this project team identifies as white. And there's not a lot of representation of those racial ethnic minorities on the team. So without really strong community collaboration and partnerships, I think there is the potential for there to be a lack of equity and inclusion worked into a site and a project that is meant to center the arts and community enrichment. And I think that could pose limits to what the team is able to do to really make this a project that serves everybody in the community. Moving on to opportunities and threats, so kind of switching outside of the focus of the nonprofit team. There are many environmentally focused nonprofits that are based in Cheshire. So I think that that creates a source of a lot of partnerships and a lot of support from other groups who are doing similar work for this brownfields redevelopment project. And I think that that really helps to increase the potential for this project's success within the town. There are also several very supportive town council members in Cheshire's local government who have expressed their support for the project so far. Many of the people on Cheshire's Town Council are involved in many of these environmentally focused nonprofits as well. So I think that helps to bring in a level of political power and will where people can advocate for this project moving forward on the governmental level. And I think that this is especially important when you consider that sometimes town council members act as liaisons or they serve on town commissions and committees, like a planning and zoning committee, for example, which often are very instrumental in helping to see that these projects come to light and are the deciding factors in whether they can move forward or not. And then lastly, just looking at general attitudes about environmentalism, environmental consciousness, I think that these recently have grown a lot more positive and open to what like brownfields are, for example, and why it's important to redevelop them and what it can bring and build and nourish for the community. I think that this has happened on the local level in Cheshire, but I think more globally and nationally too. I think that we've seen this grow a little bit. So I think on many levels that creates a lot of opportunities that would welcome a project like this in town. Now switching lastly to threats and kind of staying on the idea of general attitudes in the community. Cheshire, like a lot of small towns, like many towns, I would argue, is fairly politically divided. So if there are groups in town who are opposed to seeing an arts and community enrichment project pop up, they are likely, I think, to be pretty vocal and pretty active about expressing their disinterest in the project. And this obviously could pose some threats to the success of it moving forward. And then looking at kind of the wealth that Cheshire holds in comparison to other towns, I think this poses a threat to them accessing financial resources, especially things like environmental justice grants, because Cheshire does not have a great amount of demonstrated environmental injustice. And that kind of mixed with the inflation that has been driving up a lot of costs for materials and labor, I think that both of those things can really pose some financial strain for this project and could potentially limit its success if they don't have access to the money to really make it happen.
Great. Thank you so much for that case study, Jocelyn. It always helps to put things into perspective in that way and watch how it's done and watch what it looks like when it's, or see what it looks like when it's completed. So we are going to open it up for questions now. I'm going to leave my contact information up here. And also, this is a QR code for any feedback you may have on this webinar. We can't send this out after the fact, so if you do have any feedback, make sure to scan it now and fill it out now or whenever's convenient for you. Like I said, Jocelyn and I are going to stay on for any questions. any comments, any conversation you may want to have in these last few minutes. But if not, thank you so much to Jocelyn for being a great co-presenter. And thank you everyone for joining us today. The recording of this will be posted hopefully this week on our YouTube channel and on our website. So yeah, thank you so much. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. I'm going to stop recording now and feel free to ask any questions.